So these are the workshops that we did. Okay, so participatory planning, based on my experiences, this is how I would define it, or what I think some elements of participatory planning. It is where people can listen to others. It's a venue. It is where people express themselves. There's an exchange of views. There's cross-fertilization of ideas. Theories and paradigms are formed, understood, crystallized, and articulated. It's a process of extracting useful data from people and stakeholders. Now, I would like to emphasize extracting useful data. And then using that data to make decisions that are agreeable and advantageous to those concerned. So if people find it agreeable and advantageous, it will have the impetus for implementation. Participatory planning also paves the way for a smoother implementation, removing misunderstanding, misconceptions, and it manages our expectations. It's also a method for gaining support of the project and its design. It's also a method for motivating action from stakeholders and a method for coordinating action from stakeholders. It's a process of sharing knowledge and learning to make better decisions collectively. Collective and coordinated action produces better results in the attainment of goals. So it's also for building a harmonized understanding of concepts and issues where consensus may be accomplished. So it's very important at the onset of the project that the definitions of terms and expectations are all common to everyone, to all stakeholders. So in future participatory planning, I would then insist that all stakeholders would be present in every meeting, and they should have, or at least have some representatives throughout the participatory process. So some of my recommendations is to create a minimum requirement template for participatory planning. It's like a document where you just tick on, you have check boxes, and then so you can determine if you have done participatory planning. And then document all planligas and evaluate its outcomes, effects, and impacts. And then explore the latest and emerging technologies that will facilitate participatory planning. I've mentioned before, it's an exciting time for participatory planning because the emerging technologies actually could help us a lot. So some needs for future participatory planning. A platform, like an online portal. Actually, in Pope Francis Village, Facebook was used for where people could voice out their concerns and for them to be updated on what's happening to the project. And develop applications for participatory planning where stakeholders can contribute data, stakeholders can access this data, and stakeholders can have interaction. And then stakeholders could also perform some analytics, like percentages of certain data, and where where we can build consensus. So I've seen some technologies I think would be useful for participatory planning, and yesterday I was pleased to find out there was this game, yung Disaster Master. Yeah. So you could also use SimCity and Minecraft for participatory planning. Actually, Minecraft is being recommended by the World Bank for the youth in drawing them to participate. And of course, there are applications like BIM, the software that I use for visualization. Maybe later I could show you how it looks like. And then GIS. So essentially, BIM is for the building. With BIM, you can model, you can simulate, for example, evacuation plans. But that is just for the building. What if, because a building is not an island, it exists within hundreds of other buildings. So you would have to use GIS. So right now, technologies are being developed wherein BIM and GIS are integrated. So evacuation plan of one building and how the evacuation of one building would affect the other building. Facebook, Twitter, and then AR and VR. There. So, yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Okay, the floor is now open for questions addressed to Architect Zambrano. Okay.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I would just like to ask, because you have mentioned earlier that all sectors, you have mentioned that all sectors should be included in the process. So were there? I have seen in the pictures that women were included. However, were there other members of the vulnerable sectors, including the children, the persons with disability and elderly, included in your process? Were there issues or concerns that they have raised, and were you able to how were you able to integrate the concerns that they have raised in your design?
Okay, that would be the ideal situation where you would include those with disabilities. What we did was we tried to get as much. We tried to encourage people to open up, to voice out their concerns. Although right now we have not created a document yet that would sort of have the minimum requirements of who should be included. So how should I explain this? With the aesthetic, okay, I've worked in different projects, and each of those projects are different. I guess that's the weaknesses of the programs, is we don't have like a guide or a template yet that we could follow, and then that template that is flexible enough that we could add to it or make some adjustments. So I guess that's the weakness. What we try to do is, again, just try to get people to attend meetings and encourage them to participate. So if they're too shy, we ask them to just write it down, and then we just collate it later. Okay. But later, of course, we will try to come up with that template, as in my recommendation, so that all sectors would be included. We do not forget one sector, whether it's the children or the youth or those with disabilities or women. I hope that answered your question.
Do you have any other questions?
Thank you for that presentation. I would like to ask what were the criteria for choosing the recipients of the housing units? What happened to all those who were there some families that were displaced when you tore down the structures? And aside from the criteria, what were the thoughts of those others who were not able to receive the units?
So first is I'm sorry, I didn't have a lot of didn't have good sleep last night. Anyway,
Do you want to repeat the question?
yes, please. I think you have three questions. It confused me a little bit. I think you had three questions.
Yes. The first one is,
yeah, let me write it down. Okay.
what's the criteria for choosing those who receive?
And then those who did not receive.
Those who did not receive, what were their thoughts? What happened to them? What happened to? And the third one is, what happened to those that were relocated because you have to tear down some of the structures.
Okay, so in the people's planning approach, it was required that people themselves tear down their own houses. No one should, they're the only one who should tear it down. So they will voluntarily tear down their own houses if they already have a structure ready for them. Okay, so that avoided violent confrontations. And then what were the criteria? I was not involved with the choosing of the criteria, but what I can tell you is they have to be organized first. So by organizing people, they could weed out those professional squatters and other elements, and those who are not living there. So first they have to be organized, and each member confirms that they are residents here. Yeah, so that's the first criteria, and they have to have some kind of savings. So it helps people prepare for any expenses, and it makes people work on something while waiting for the housing. So savings, and they have to organize themselves. And the other question was, what happened to those who were relocated? They had choices. People had choices. People were not forced to go off-site, near-site. They were giving choices whether they want relocation off-site or on-site. So it's really up to them where they want to be relocated. But in actual implementation, there were very limited options. Certain sites in the city can accommodate only so much families. So although some people would want to live there, but there simply aren't anymore enough units. I hope I answered all three. Okay.
Okay. Do we have questions over there, that side? And then, yes, the microphone is with Seth.
Good morning. It's nice that you presented about informal sectors in an urban setting. I'm a city planner from the city of Santa Rosa. Yeah, my question is, I'm not sure if you presented who owns the land, who developed the building, and how are they paying for this? Of course, this is not free.
Yes, yeah, they're paying monthly fees for the building. Okay, so the people were asked to look for land, and they were able to identify the land. These are residual lands from recreation land. These lands, some of them have existing structures on them, some of them are vacant. Okay, now, so after identifying the land, so the community asked DNR to survey the area. So they determined the boundaries, the exact extent of it, and then a proclamation was issued for the that be the quickest way, a proclamation utilizing that land for social housing. And the other projects, the JMRV, they could not find any more residual lands. So, but they have this. SHFC has a program of high density housing. SHFC would buy private lands, but that would be a little more complicated. It would be easier if it's also from government lands. So SHFC have acquired government land from the Department of Finance, and we would be building structures there for usufruct land arrangement. And then, how much? Okay, the last time I've heard they were paying 300. The structures in Estero de San Miguel is being administered by the SWD. So they are owned by the SWD right now.
Another question? Okay.
Sir, good morning. My name
Hi.
My name is April. I'm an occupational therapist. Sir, I appreciate that you've incorporated green design and disaster resilient designs in the buildings. I'm also curious to know if you have considered incorporating aspects of the universal design to ensure that your buildings or the structures are inclusive and accessible to people with disabilities. That's my first question. And then number two, I also appreciate that you incorporated increase in income opportunities for the settle for the families who will be settling in the buildings. But I'm curious to know as well if there have been positive or negative impacts based on the changes in the structures and in the design in general. Thank you.
So you have two questions. One is on universal design. With yung Estero de San Miguel, we were working on very narrow stretch of land. So it was really very difficult to have a universal design, like the stairs. In my other structures, I would have 0.15 centimeters the heights of the risers. So even if you were on crutches, it would be easier for you to go up. But in the area there, we were working on very limited space. So the solution was to put the elderly and those with disabilities on the lower floors. But in the other project, the GMRD, we were able to have the stairs have only 0.10 or 0.15. So it would be easier. We would certainly wanted to have a ramp. Unfortunately, it would be very expensive. We were operating on a 450 budget per unit. Yeah, but if government could increase it, then why not? And then income, yeah, you also asked about income. I have not done yet a study, but from the pictures, yung kay Aling Feli, well, she was teary-eyed. And I think she had more customers now, judging by the more goods or things that she was selling in her store. Yes, the next question.
Morning, I'm from University of San Carlos.
Yeah.
In Cebu, we're doing the similar thing also. There's a ISF in certain barangay called Hakupiao in Mandaue. We're doing integrated risk management, and I surmise that your project also included integrated all risk management. But I wanted to see in the participatory plan, at what best did the academe and even INGO works best in the stages, and to what extent are they still involved in the post-project engagement of your project?
Unfortunately, very limited. Although I visit the site once in a while for personal reasons because I was involved in it, I have a stake in it, so once in a while I visit it. Unfortunately, there's no formal mechanisms. Schools, they have their community involvement program. So I think maybe we could refine it better, wherein you involve different colleges to collaborate. So you engage all 7 steps. The first few steps is more sociological, more on so part of the Department of Sociology working with the technical, and then economics later. So maybe we could have something more integrated, organized that way for community programs for the schools.
Good morning, Architect Zambrano. My name is Ching, and I'm a heritage advocate. I have 2 questions for you. Would it be possible for you to share some insights on the positive, if any, at all, environmental impacts of your project? Since Estero de San Miguel is a historic waterway in Manila. And my second question is, since the project was started in 2014 or 2015, has it been replicated by DSWD at the very least in some other urban centers outside of Manila? Thank you.
Well, there was a lot of talk of replication. Unfortunately, in the Philippines, of course, you know how it is, even in barangay level or whatever the previous administration did was all wrong. Okay, so all Open Ligas is totally standstill right now. Also, the budget for housing has been slashed. And then some insights on environmental impact. I would like to do some studies on that. Unfortunately, no studies of that are being undertaken. Well, in school, maybe when I get, right now I'm on leave. But maybe when I get back to school, I would encourage my students to do some research on that to determine the environmental impacts. And then as for heritage, as much as possible, we also try to incorporate 17th century architecture and mix it with modern, clean lines. Okay, so at least you still have some arcs right there that would somehow remind you of 17th century Philippine architecture.
Okay, I'm trying to balance the responses of the audience now, so we are finished here and then we go over there. Lily, you want to ask question?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a question because you took a population that had been largely invisible from other buildings in the context and brought it up into the visual landscape. And you're actually blocking off the views of the windows from the church. So I'm curious as to, and I know the answer for where I've worked, but I'm wondering what the answer is from your perspective of what were the local adjacent landholders' responses to you pulling a poor population up into their face?
Yeah, at first, yes, we talked to the parish priest right there, and of course he was really resistant to it. But that portion, the church is not facing that way. It's actually facing the other way, not the waterway. So you have the church facing, it only appears that way, but it's not. It did not block anything behind it. Yes, and well, during that time there were no drones yet, so it was hard for me to do some analysis on what would be blocked. But now we have drones and we have this city engine of S3. So we could determine the views, what would be blocked and how from different vantage points. So technology is really helping us a lot. Yeah, and I also have a question for you. By the way, I was not able, if I may ask it now. I wanted to ask you a question a while ago. Like, I was interested because I'm an architect. I was wondering if you could tell us more about what were the women's concerns with their design, house design.
Well, actually, yeah, I teach architecture too. The biggest problem people have in the cities I've worked in India or Bangladesh is actually going vertical in terms of being able to carry things up several stories. Whether it be children, whether it be, whatever they're bringing from their shopping. And because a lot of them have a livelihood that usually happens right outside of their door. And so the fact that they're cut off from external ground is a huge concern. So, if you do go vertical, then the idea of having outdoor workspaces, I know in Sri Lanka there are a lot of, because it is an outdoor culture, there are a lot of open terraces where people can have businesses, but the circulation has to remain very public. It can't get absorbed into the private units. So it becomes like a public street that happens to be now going uphill.
Yes, it's important that they have space on the ground.
Okay, so we will try to accommodate last 3 questions since it's already almost 12 o'clock. So Ma'am will be asking a question and then the other one there, and then the last I think would be Ma'am. Okay.
Good morning again. I know you are an architect, but I have to ask all about community organizing because you mentioned about it. What will be the sustainability part, and at the same time, what is the process of transition coming from the multidisciplinary group to community-based organized group? The sustainability transition and the process of transition.
That's a difficult question. I wish I could answer that question. Well, okay, let me try. The sustainability from the, usually it's UPA who's handling those aspects.
You will be the last one. Okay.
Good morning, architect. Thank you for the work you did. I think it's very inspiring for us. But my question is, culturally, we Filipinos would love to accommodate our extended relatives coming from the provinces, whether their children are going to school in Manila or looking for work. And that has a very positive as well as negative impact on the family life. Especially for this project, I imagine that there will be some impact on visiting relatives who said they will stay for a while but actually will stay for good, or the concept of nahihiya, or we are embarrassed to drive them away or ask them to leave after some time. So my question really is, were you able to incorporate that in your design, and at the same time, has it had, and what was the impact of that in the project?
Yeah. In terms of extended families, the government program has certain budgets. I have to work on these budgets. So it would really be very difficult to accommodate extended families in these projects. But what we did, or what we try to do on the next project, is we try to create the projects as flexible as possible. Meaning the spaces, the structures could contract or it could expand whenever there is a need for it. Changes, families are very dynamic. They expand, or sometimes they contract, sometimes their income rises, sometimes it goes down. So I think the structure should also be able to accommodate this flexibility. So the way we've laid out in the JMRV village is the houses some parts of the house could contract and some parts of it could expand. Like your neighbor, if they don't need the extra space, you can get that extra space by some kind of agreement, whether it's sale or rental. So you just have to move some partitions. So that's the solutions that we are looking into, flexibility of space. You don't really need a big room throughout your life. Sometimes you need smaller, sometimes bigger. Hopefully that would answer the Thank you.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much, Architect, for being part of that noble undertaking, building that very good project. My concern is, in constructing that project, did you consider the nearness or farness of those building into the West Valley Fault? And I just want to clarify the integrity of the structure, because though maybe this is far from the West Valley Fault, this certainly will be affected by the ground shaking as well. And we're talking here of resiliency. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. To make buildings stable from earthquakes first is the site. You have to have a stable site. Unfortunately, the site is near water, so the ground is a little soft. And when we did a soil boring test, it was 15 meters deep. So it was that deep. If you're going to put piles to stabilize your structure, it would cost about 1 million per pile. So that would be out of the question. But putting piles there could extend the height of the building. So we had to stick to just 3 floors instead of going higher. And then we also installed a mat foundation. So a mat foundation is like you have the entire ground floor. That, unfortunately, that also increased the cost of the building. But that's the balance that we have found.
Okay, let's accommodate one last question, because he is requesting for a last one question. Okay, that's his request.
Thank you very much. Just one last question. I'm interested about your experience on the impact of politics to these projects. Could you share a little bit on that, and maybe some insights as to probably how to go around it, or some practical insights for the planners, researchers, and even project implementers?
It's really very difficult to answer that question given the climate right now. But what I could tell you is this. Well, I don't have confirmation of this. Okay, I just heard it through informal conversations, what I heard on the ground. So Typhoon Ondoy happened 2009, and there was an election in 2010. So there was no immediate plans or programs to address Typhoon Ondoy. It only happened after the new administration. So during that administration, they reviewed a lot of DPWH projects, and they found it to be, most of them, overpriced, funded. So there was a sort of slowdown of investments on infrastructure. So the Philippine economy did not grow very well. And they used that savings to fund the 50 billion. And so I'm talking now about the DAP. Yeah, this is the DAP. So although there were legal arguments for its legality, but it was later on declared illegal. But what's ironic is the PDAF is legal. Okay, so those are some of the things that I found very saddening. What else? Another part of your question was how to go around some difficulties. In government, like for example, everyone is doing something for themselves and for other people in various degrees. Okay, so the project, we knew that one of the reasons why it was not just NHA, because NHA is highly technical. You have architects and engineers in there. What the SWD did was, it has a more social orientation. So it brought a different perspective to house construction and house building. It had a more social orientation. But then the SWD is not experienced in technicalities or house construction, but it asked the help of DPWH to build it. But the SWD was still the lead. So it sort of dictated to the technical to adjust